Alright, this is the video lecture of the lab on the female reproductive system, and this is on the bottom of page 33 and top of all of page 34. So in looking at the bottom of page 33, there is a slide you have to look at of the ovaries. There's a picture of this on page 1036 of your textbook. And then looking at page 34 of your lab packet, objective number 5, the diagrams in your textbook that correspond to those structures are found on page 1035 and 1037. Objective number 6, best picture is page 1040. Objective number 7, 1042. So we're going to start with objective number 5 and then work our way back to objective number 4, looking at the tissue slide. So objective number 5, the ovary. The ovary is shown here as number 1 in the pelvic cavity of the female. Ovaries are found inside the body, unlike the testes, which are housed outside the body in the male. And these produce eggs. Receiving the egg that is ovulated from the ovary once a month is this structure here, this tube-like structure called the uterine tube. So number 2 is out here where it's tube-like in structure, so that would be the uterine tube or the oviduct. And the widened end of the uterine tube is called the infundibulum. Think of it as a funnel leading into the oviduct. So that is the infundibulum, or the widened end of the uterine tube, or fallopian tube is another name for it. But this is the infundibulum, that widened end. And then there's these finger-like extensions that are found on the end of the infundibulum. Those are called the fimbriae. So the fimbriae are these, like I said, these finger-like extensions that receive the egg and help waft it into the uterine tube. The uterine tube or fallopian tube then leads to the uterus, which is this muscular organ here where the baby will develop, or the lining is shed every month with the menstrual period or menstrual flow. Again, this is the uterus. Different parts of the uterus, the top of the uterus is called the fundus. So this top portion here is the fundus, and that's what's measured in women who are pregnant. They want to make sure that fundus is at the right spot in pregnancy, and they can determine how far along a pregnancy is. Once it gets to a certain point in pregnancy, that measurement from the pubic bone to the top of the fundus corresponds to the weeks of pregnancy, and that measurement is taken in centimeters. So the bottom of the uterus, the opening of the uterus that leads to the vaginal canal here, this labeled number 6, this is the cervix. So this kind of looks like a smile-shaped structure here. That is the cervix, and it's the opening to the vaginal canal from the uterus. So this is the uterus here, and that opening to the vaginal canal is the cervix. The body of the uterus is just this main central portion of the uterus. So the top is the fundus, the main middle portion is the body, and the bottom of it that opens up into the vaginal canal is the cervix. And during pregnancy, this is another measurement that's taken toward the end of pregnancy. They look at this cervical opening to see if the opening has opened up. Then we call that dilation. And if this canal here, this thickened region, if that is starting to thin out, they call that effacement. So that's something that's measured, again, in the late stages of pregnancy. And then if we look at the layers of the uterus, the endometrium is the inner layer. So that's what would be lining this passageway here within the uterus. This inner lining is the endometrium. And that's what's shed every month with the menstrual flow. And this is also where the fertilized egg will implant the zygote as it travels down the fallopian tube. It will implant in the endometrium of the uterus, and that's where it will grow and develop. The myometrium is this thick muscular layer. This is the layer that contracts during the menstrual period and also during childbirth. So this thick middle layer is the myometrium, the muscular layer of the uterus. The perimetrium is the outer layer. So all this here on the outside, this thin outer layer, is the perimetrium. And that's what we worry about with uterine rupture, is that women who have had multiple C-sections, that if they have a childbirth with intense contractions and a weakened area from previous incisions from C-sections, that uterus can rupture and tear through the perimetrium and cause bleeding, and that can cause loss of life in the mother as well as the child. And then lastly is the muscular vaginal canal. So this region here is the canal. This is where menstrual flow comes out from the endometrium, and this is where a baby passes through during childbirth and where intercourse occurs as well. So those are primarily the internal structures of the reproductive tract. The outer structures of the reproductive tract are called the vulva. And if you look at page 1040 in your textbook, it kind of gives you an anterior view of these structures. But I'm going to show you them in this side view because we can see some of the structures here as well. So the vulva we can't really identify as a single structure. It's a collection of structures. It's all these external structures here of the female. So there are two folds of tissue that cover the opening to the reproductive and urinary tract in women, and the larger fatty flaps of tissue are called the Labia Majora. So the two folds of fatty tissue that grow pubic hair, labeled number 12 here, they are called the Labia Majora. And then if we look at the inner folds, they're thinner, darker in color, do not grow pubic hair. Those are the Labia Minora. So there's two sets of these, or not two sets, but there are two of these tissues, one on each side, that come together and again protect these openings, the urethra and the vaginal canal, these labia. So that's the Labia Minora. And then in the most anterior position is a specialized structure. It's analogous to the male penis, and it contains corpus cavernosum here, you can see. So it does become erect as it becomes engorged with blood during stimulation, and this is called the clitoris. So number 13 here is called the clitoris, and that is has that corpus cavernosum tissue, and that does play a role in the female orgasm and arousal during intercourse. And next we have the urethral opening. This leads to the bladder. So this is a separate passageway, unlike in the male where we saw the reproductive and urinary tracts were in the same route, same passageway. The urethral opening to the female is separate. So this leads only to the bladder. That's the urethra. The vaginal opening, again, we already talked about that. That's this larger structure here for menstrual flow, intercourse, and a vaginal birth. And then the Mons Pubis. The Mons Pubis is a fatty mound of tissue that lies over the pubic bone. So here's the pubic bone, the pubis. This fatty mound of tissue here is called the Mons Pubis, and that also grows pubic hair. And the function of that is maybe just to provide a little cushion over the pubic bone to prevent damage and injury over the pubic bone. So again, I recommend that you identify these structures on the diagram in your textbook on page 1040. There's definitely some good pictures there to look at, and I'll quick show you. I think I have a picture of that in the Dropbox folder. I'll just make sure I can find it here. Maybe we don't have it. We're looking for that front view. I'm not seeing it here. So I would say be sure to look at that in your textbook on page 1040. I'm just going to look one more time. Nope, I don't see a front view. So again, look at that on page 1040 in your textbook. And then lastly, the female breast. If we look at the outside of the female breast, the darkened region around the nipple is called the areola, and that just allows the newborn to visualize the food source, and the nipple serves as an attachment point for the newborn. There's also special oil glands on the areola that help to keep this skin moist and protects from skin breakdown with the baby suckling on it. Then if we open up and look on the interior of the breast, we see these large cauliflower-like structures here, and these are called alveolar glands, and that's what produces milk during in a nursing mother's breast. So this primarily develops late in pregnancy, and the milk doesn't fully come in until about day 3 after childbirth. So these are the alveolar glands, and these glands produce milk, and that milk flows through the nipple via these lactiferous ducts. So these blackened ducts here at the end of the nipple that lead to the nipple, those are the lactiferous ducts. And if bacteria enter the nipple through these ducts, it can infect the alveolar glands and cause and promote bacterial growth, and that's called mastitis. And that's a real problem for farmers, and when they work in the conditions in the barn that aren't necessarily the cleanest. If good technique is not used for those milking machines, cows can get mastitis, and that can cause infection. Then they have to go on antibiotics, and nobody wants antibiotic residues in their milk, so those cows that have mastitis are out of production until the mastitis is cleared and the antibiotics are cleared from their system as well. Here is another view of the breast. This is a non-lactating breast. You can see the alveolar glands are much smaller compared to the lactating breast. So this could be the same breast in a woman who's nursing versus not. So that's the difference between them. But they are present in the female breast. It's just a matter of how well developed they are under the influence of those hormones associated with pregnancy and childbirth. So our last structure we need to visit, well, a couple models, pictures I'll show you. This one is another picture of the uterus. So here's the ovary, and here's the fimbriae of the uterine tube, and this whole structure here is the uterus. So this inner lining here would be the endometrium. This region here on either side, that would be the myometrium. And this opening here at the end of the uterus leading to the vaginal canal, this would be the cervix. So this structure here is the cervix. This is the vaginal canal. So this is just another view of the uterus in this special model that we have. And then we're going to go back and take a look at the ovary. So this is on the bottom of page 32 in your, page 33 in your lab packet. So we have the ovary. This whole structure here is the ovary, this entire pink structure. So there's many, many eggs in different stages of development within the ovary. So the primary follicle is the least developed egg within the ovary, and those are found around the edge of the ovary here. We can see these small structures here. Those are the primary follicles. They're labeled number 1 here. Oh, I apologize. No, that's the... Make sure I'm looking at the right thing here. So we have the primary follicle, primary oocyte. Okay, so the primary follicle is the layer of cells that surrounds an egg. So in this case, this would be the primary follicle, the layer of cells around the egg. And then we have the primary oocyte inside of it. So a primary oocyte is the actual egg with the follicle around it. So here's the follicle, the layer of cells around the primary oocyte. So here's the oocyte in the center. Oocyte is another name for the egg. So this is an egg that is not quite developed yet, not ready to be ovulated or released from the ovary. So this is the primary oocyte with the primary follicle around it. And then we look at a much more mature egg. This is number 5 here. This would be the secondary oocyte. So much more mature egg with the Graafian follicle, this large layer of cells around it with this fluid-filled space here. You don't need to know what that is called. You'll learn that in advanced A&P. It's called the antrum, but you don't need to know that. But the large follicle is called the Graafian follicle. It's a mature follicle. And this egg inside of it here, number 5, is the secondary oocyte. And that is the histology of the ovary. And that concludes our discussion of the female reproductive anatomy. I encourage you to visit the Dropbox link in Blackboard to practice looking at these structures and do the mini lab practical to see how well you can identify the different structures we discussed in this lab video.